Once again, as another week goes by, we have another push in the direction of digital infrastructure, now looking at digital driving licenses in the form of essentially a digital ID. Now, many have been warning against digital IDs for a long time. The idea that you have one form of digital identification that holds your driving license, your passport, your vaccination status, etc., etc. When COVID hit back in 2020, this was a hot topic, and it still is to this day. A lovely man such as Tony Blair seems to be obsessed with the idea.
You can create a digital ID today that is much more easily protected, so you can deal with a lot of the privacy and surveillance issues that worry people. But it's a natural evolution of the way that we're going to use technology in any event to transact daily life. And this COVID crisis gives an additional reason for doing that.
Tony Blair admits UK will need a little persuading to embrace digital ID. So the question is then, what kind of persuading do we need?
Now, it does seem convenient. It almost seems quite subtle and not important. You have to understand the significance of your life being stored in one digital place. All of your bank account information, everything centered in one form of ID, where those with very poor nefarious intentions can have a look at all of your personal information. Stop you from traveling to other countries because you're not up to date on your vaccination status. Does this seem wild, or does this actually seem quite realistic considering what we've been witnessing over the past 4 or 5 years? You then can expand it even more, looking at your carbon footprint, tracking how much carbon you are using. The less carbon you use, the better your life can be. But then what does that sound like? Sounds to me like it's mimicking a social credit system such as the one they have in China. The better your behavior, the better you act, the more you comply, the better your life becomes. The only way this can be tracked and monitored is through the form of a digital ID. It's the scariest and most significant threat I believe we can see happening in the near future. So young people, this is something you really need to focus on, because of course we are the ones that are savvy with technology and are going to be carrying the baton of the digital world. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's good. Do you want a future which can be easily controlled and tracked?
The government is now announced that it's launching a gov.uk digital wallet and app, which they claim is going to simplify access to services and documents. The document they chose to highlight for the greatness of this scheme was the digital driver's license. But as we mentioned a number of weeks ago, they're already talking about the veterans card being the first digital ID that they're going to add to this new system.
How many times have you heard this saying? Well, if you're not doing anything wrong, then you have nothing to hide. This is the most overused statement by those who want to infringe on our freedoms and expand their dystopian authoritarian mindset. You've got to remember, Tony Blair actually said that people are going to need a form of identification at some point in order to travel based on their vaccination status.
I think you'll find a situation where countries say to you, you're not coming in here unless we see whether you've either been vaccinated, you've had the disease and have got antibodies, or you've had a recent high-quality test. People have got to understand vaccination is going to be, in the end, your route to liberty.
So you can't claim that I am somewhat crazy and conspiratorial. This is legitimate information from very, very bad people in my opinion. And I think many others who are watching this video and who subscribe and support UK Column would certainly agree. If we don't resist digital IDs and a digital infrastructure fueled with surveillance, authoritarianism, control, then we really are going to move in the direction of 1984 becoming a severe reality. And it's young people who have to steer the ship. It's the youth that have a responsibility to wake up to what people's actual motivations are when bringing forward the digitalization of our country. This is expanding globally. This is happening across Europe. Many will allude to a plan. Agenda 2030, the UN's Agenda 2030, the hub of what seems to be virtuous objectives, but objectives that are being brought through in a way which I don't think benefits people. But it certainly benefits someone. Those with an ego complex, those hungry for money, those hungry for control. But what's the good news? The good news is we do have the majority on our side. You see, if the BBC or other mainstream media outlets were to be completely honest with the majority of people as to what's going on in the world, rather than just roughly talking about digital IDs or lockdowns or vaccine passports and so forth, but really broke down the pros and cons to each of these realities, then I can guarantee the majority of the population would be in uproar. But it's the fact that those people watching mainstream media don't necessarily scratch beneath the surface, and as soon as people do, they become quote unquote awake and completely understand what is happening in the world. We are the majority. It is the 99% versus the 1%, and it's the 1% that want a huge amount of control over the average person. You've only got to look at the kind of people who meet up in Davos, or the multi-millionaires, or the very, very wealthy 1%, the huge conglomerates of corporations like BlackRock and Vanguard that own huge quantities of the West. These are the organizations and the people behind the scenes pulling certain strings to benefit themselves and push the United Kingdom in the direction of a very dystopian reality, where authoritarianism is secretly hidden in plain sight and freedom is stripped away bit by bit. We, the people, have a power to resist this, but it starts by using cash, reading beyond mainstream media headlines, supporting alternative journalism like UK Column. In fact, you can support UK Column by going over to their website and subscribing for a monthly amount, a yearly amount, or a lifetime amount in order to support and promote independent journalism. They're fighting on behalf of truth, freedom, and reality. Parents, speak to your children. Explain to them the importance of resisting mass digitalization and understanding how technology can be used for bad as much as it can be used for good. Use cash and reject any form of mass surveillance that gives the government insight into our personal lives, where we go, how we travel, what our vaccination status is, a digital driving license. We as a collective can reject these measures, but we can only do that in unity. My name is Montgomery Toms. Thank you for watching this video. Send it out to young people specifically. Engage with my generation, and please do everything you can to support those willing to put in the frontline work in spaces such as activism, political campaigns, rejecting mainstream narratives, alternative journalism. It's so important that we all support each other, because together we can win against this dystopian future.